Hey, creative, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the bridge between creative storytelling for entertainment and functional business work and business storytelling. This is a solution I've been looking for a long time, so I'm incredibly excited about that. We're going to talk about this book, Stories Sell, it just came out in July, and this has been the bridge that finally unlocked all this stuff for me. I can't tell you how excited I am about it. And we're going to talk about how to use it. And then we're going to apply it later in the episode together on the spooky Halloween menus from the Nelson-Greenbrier Distillers Halloween event.
Looking forward to it. And I have to say, you're torturing me a little bit by having me look at this beautiful menu of drinks. And I'm not down there to enjoy it.
We identified the problem. Now we can find the solution next year.
Man, I miss Greenbrier. They do such a great job. And looking at this menu, I'm excited because they took something that we've been looking at and talking about and put it into practice.
Yeah, it's been a joy to see them skyrocket where they were already really strong in the fundamentals. And this is something we talk about from time to time where it's that extra polish that makes the difference. It's just try to just become world Olympian level on the base thing, because that renovation they've done to the dining hall, it's so nice. It's top tier. But having them woven together make this new thing.
Outstanding work. So I cannot wait to see what all they did to this menu and share that with everyone here.
Right. So we'll get into that. First, I want to look back in things that relate to what we did last episode. Before I start on that, is there any updates or thoughts or any experiences that you want to bring into us?
Well, right now I'm going through an experience where I plugged in my microphone today, and for the first, half an hour, could not get it to work. No sound whatsoever. So I am coming to you guys from my phone right now. Yeah. This is just to say that things just happen. I have no idea what's going wrong with it yet, but I'm going to have to learn. Don't let that get in the way. Keep making stuff.
There's a saying I've been hearing a lot lately that the stronger you get, it's not that you get damaged less often. It just changes how quickly you recover.
I thought you were going to say something about small pots again. I don't know.
So I think this is a kind of a mark forward of your progression as a professional, that you can make a backup plan. Nothing's going to stop. It keeps going.
Absolutely. Show must go on.
Show is going on. So I wanted to bring up, related to what we talked about last week, a little follow-up on that. We were talking about Stage Academy and a lot of the new techniques that came from that. There's a lot of overlap between that world and the storytelling stuff that we're going to discuss today. But the number one thing that stuck out last week, or last episode, was the idea of telling a story that is vulnerable enough that it doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it makes the audience uncomfortable. And then immediately say something funny to kind of immediately set the stage for the audience that we will go to very deep things, so this will have value. But I immediately preview that we're going to make it lighthearted and fun, so you're not going to be stuck with an emotional slog. You can trust us to not make this miserable. I was going through some older videos. The first courses I went through were that 14-day filmmaker class, and that has some other components. And one of this guys was this guy, Dan Geyer. And he's so memorable because he was just so unbelievably over the top. Every module that he taught, it would start with music so dramatic, it would seem overdone even in a Marvel movie. And he's explaining on you how to make an email list. And it was just hilarious where you're laughing, but you can't be laughing at him because you would adore that enthusiasm so much that this is a great thing. I'm starting to work on something else, skip that stage, but it required some of that knowledge. So I went there to use it. It's great that I have these resources I can go back to. It's been a year. He's redone it. First of all, it was beautiful, really nice. He's originally a cinematographer, That's first, so to be expected. Second of all, it's amazing and warm of my heart to see how much his speaking skills have improved. He was the guy before who was very enthusiastic, but so much so that he would tumble over his words and a little awkward but endearing. And a year later, he's just brilliantly smooth. It's so much more enjoyable. It holds your attention longer. It was like it's great to see that growth.
And great to know that even if you're at the point where you have a successful course teaching people to do these things, you can still improve. You don't need to be perfect yet. We're all just trying to get better.
Yeah, yeah. So you can't really separate cleanly how well you speak from the script and how well you write the things you're saying. I went to the first module and he starts off with, okay, we're going to do an introduction, tell you about who I am. And he starts off with, so I need to tell you that really got me into this industry was the fact that when I was younger, my dad died of stage 4 cancer. And immediately he says, but all the way through it, all the way to the end, he never lost his hair. So at least I know I have those genes. It's like, it's the pattern. And even knowing it and seeing it, like, wow, this makes me feel comfortable and happy. And I'm engaged. Like, you've bought yourself another half an hour that you could read the phone book and I would still listen to you, Dan. That is it. It's so amazingly how powerful how these things are. It's neat that I can recognize them in the wild now, but still, dude, man, I'm just going to say, I'm glad I learned this. I'm glad I shared it because this is a really powerful technique. So wholeheartedly recommend it in the wild.
I almost think that when you know what techniques they're using and you've seen behind the curtain a little bit, when you see someone use a technique like that well and effectively, it almost gets your attention more. Because now you know, oh, they know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about. It's not just this comes natural to them and they've got some charisma. It's, oh, you've put time and effort into this. I'm going to see what else.
That's another point. It's another sign that they're putting the time and skill into this making nice, so I can kind of trust. Yeah, I can trust there's going to be good stuff coming. You also make another good point where this had a highly strong effect. It was not well done. There was never a bridge of why his father dying changed his life, got him into cinematography or anything. That trail just never got connected. And it's still so effective.
Oh my goodness. Never looped it back in.
No, it was, I could swear to God that one of those people in the team who's done this for longer said, hey, you should do this. You put it in. They never really came back to explaining how it should be done. But it still freaking works the whole time. My mind's just going, yeah, that was a really great start, man. Like, I'm on your side. I'm looking forward to hearing when it connects. And then half an hour later, the video ends and it never connected. I'm like, oh well.
Man, that feels like a Chekhov's gun situation. What do you mean? You can't have a loaded gun and not have it go off. That's not how it works.
Not how it should work, but we're coming back to this over again, Ryan. 80-20, 80-20. All of these things that make us feel afraid to do something for the first time or afraid to try a new technique for the first time because you're not going to do it well. You know, I obsess about that a lot. It completely doesn't matter. If you do this new technique if there's a new technique that you think is interesting or could be helpful, try it. Even if you think you're not going to do it well, because even if you do it poorly, it's going to add a lot, even if you do a bad job.
I'm almost wondering if it's more impactful doing it wrong, because you were kept waiting and waiting, going, okay, come on, he's got to tie it back in. You had your attention the whole time, not just, oh, he looped it back in, now it makes sense. Feels complete, I don't need to listen to the rest.
Could be, man. Could be. Point still comes down to, we should try more of this. I have a list of things from this book and this book that I want to try. And it's been this idea of making a list of all of them after I finish all the books and then start trying them. And that experience watching Dan makes me think, Dan, I should start trying these right now. The sooner than possible, get them in.
Things only get better, right?
cannot believe how useful and powerful these are, even at the beginner stage. So I wanted to bring that up real quick. Next, for this was part of like a review things of stuff that I was working on last year. This time a year ago, you remember I was putting in crazy amounts of time on that whiskey tasting program I was putting together.
Yes, I do.
That's the program that Dan Geyer teaches. That's why these two connect. I went through and watched my original ad, and two things stood out a lot for me. One, I remember how people's eyes glazed over when I was reading the script to try to get help from my friends of what I should do differently. And then when their eyes actually popped open was during the personal story part I put in. And I understand now, not only that is how this works, but I now understand what parts of the story worked and what parts of that story didn't work and how I can make it a lot better now instead of just by accident.
I'd love to see what you do and what you do to change it now. Not even having to do the whole program, just remake the ad and see if people try and get into it, what they say.
It's exciting to be able to now feel I could do that intentionally, which means I could probably do it in 3 days. The module was actually called 1 Day Script, and it took me 3 months to write that thing. And it was agony how slow it was. But now, because I understand this stuff, I think I could probably do it in a day or two. Such a relief.
It's a muscle, I swear. The more you do it, the better and faster you get at it. But you can't improve. You can't make a good story without practicing.
I think obviously you're right. You are the expert on this half. There's a few things I'm good at, but you are by far the expert on that. And practice. So much of this isn't just experimentation. For me, it's the sticking points I think were more emotional, where you're not sure, will this work or will this not work? Should I do this or that? And the only way to know those things is through experience. Because what works for you is not going to be the same as anyone else. But those, I honestly believe, are the biggest slowdowns of writing. That indecision, because you don't know yet. And the fastest way is open all these freaking doors and find out that sucks, this is good, this is good. And as soon as you get those out of the way, then you start getting to writing fast, where I like that, I like that, I like that. You can just do it is the only way to actually find that out.
So again, it comes back to just do it. Are we going to get Nike sponsorship on this? I feel like we've been saying that a lot.
We will try my newfound corporate and storytelling skills and see what we can put together.
Worth a shot.
Now, to get into it, I want to talk about the concept of this and how we can apply that. This is the bridge that connects everything together. If you were here, Ryan, I would fucking hug you right now.
Okay.
This turned everything into not just, okay, if I struggle really hard, I can sort of jury rig them together so I can have both at once, half-assed. This actually turns all of this storytelling stuff that I've been arguing and getting mad about. Remember that giant spreadsheet of all the types of genre I put together to try and untangle this in my brain? It connects it as fuel that actually enhances each other instead of some kind of backpack to try and squeeze in. This means that we can do an entire episode completely diving into your storytelling techniques, your ideas, how you do it. And instead of back when I was reading this book thinking, well, that's cute, but it doesn't apply. So this is fun, but just pointless. I see that that is actually fueling 100% the business, teaching, and technical type of writing that I want to do. They actually they're actually like siblings now.
So can I ask you to go a little bit more in depth on how they connect to you? What made that connection in your head work?
Yes, we will definitely get into that. I got a section a little later where I'm going to talk about the best parts I found. I can't go through all of them in one episode.
Sure.
Probably going to pad a little bit more time this episode, but I got a section where we're going to talk about what are the best takeaways for actually bridging that gap. So many of them are just magic tricks where I would never guess it in a million years. But when he points it out, it's just, oh, duh, that will take 30 seconds. God damn, so much work I went into it. The key could have been given to me like long ago. But good question. I do want to try and not just give a sermon about what I've learned and take the time to have more of a discussion on this. So slow me down. And the questions that I already have plans for answers later, we'll just save it for then. But I want to hear more about this. The first part I want to get to is, I wrote this really harshly, how to take that emotional junk and do something useful with it.
Okay.
The core of what I'm trying to do is for teaching, right? And this isn't the how, but this is the why. The thing in this book that opened my mind so much of how this is going to actually help is there's two big reasons that actually help people teach and help people learn. One, and you get these from storytelling. One is you're just going to maximize the value you get per second of technical speak you do have. The idea I had before was I have this very difficult topic that takes 10 minutes to explain. And it's already hard to get people to listen for 10 minutes. If I'm adding a story, that's just making the burden even heavier. It's going to be less chance people are going to listen all the way to the end and get the information they need to be able to use it and have that impact on their life. The truth is completely the opposite. The reality is, if somebody sits and you are the most important person in the world to them, and this is the most important topic to them, and they try really hard to listen, they're only going to get about 10% of that 10 minutes. That's how our attention span works. If you use storytelling, you might sacrifice like a quarter of your time, but each minute you have after that is going to have about a 5 to 10x multiplier on how much they listen. Maybe, so in this example, they're only listening to the technical part for 7.5 minutes, but they're getting a solid 4 minutes of that into their brain and stick with them. The reasons for this: one, you have a big leap of attention. If you start with a story or have stories woven into it, people are going to pay attention to it a lot higher percent of the time. Second, it's going to hook all of the stakeholders. If you're doing something important, like if you're selling a vampire novel, everyone's pretty uniform. Everybody is people interested in vampires looking for a good time. If you're doing something functional, business or educational, entertainment's important, relaxing's important, but we are going to make those distinctions. So for functional, you have a lot of different people involved. You have, say I'm launching a new product. I'm looking at a lot of Steve Jobs keynotes right now. If I'm launching the Macintosh, you have engineers, you have scientists at both your company and the client's companies who are verifying, will this actually work? What's meet your specifications and our needs? You have people who are going to advertise it, needing to know how they're going to advertise it. You have the sales teams, which is essential for this ever making any money. Their CEO, all this stuff. All these different people have different personalities, different parts they're interested in. And your facts are only going to hit certain people. But you start with a story or weave those in, that hooks every single kind of person. In a functional thing, you're not just getting, my target demographic who likes me only remembered 10% of it. It's a thing where only 20% of the people did that 10%, and the rest were zero. So your average is more close to 1% of paying attention. Possibly even more important, you have a massive leap in conviction. Whenever you're speaking in without a story, you're only telling things in an abstract concept. And the difference that I'm being a hypocrite because I should have prepared a story example for this. But if you explain something, let me try and think. Okay, the thing I'm doing a lot of videos on right now. If you have a lot of clarity on exactly what your values are, you're going to feel a lot less burned out at work, and you're going to put a lot more time in without feeling like it's work. So you're going to accomplish a lot more than your competition. You're going to be a lot better at it and also enjoy it. All right? Understandable, but that's all abstractions. And there's this gut feeling that, well, okay, that's a good theory, but does it actually work in the real world? Has anyone ever tried this? And if I say a story instead of saying, when I was in college, I was really close to clarity, but I kind of didn't have it. So I struggled at playing guitar and eventually didn't get good. kind of got burned out and quit. But then later I got clarity through these programs and started working on writing and YouTube work. And I put in 80 hours a week. I definitely learned more about that. I know so much more about it. I've stuck with it through so much hard stuff that there's probably no chance I'll ever stop doing this, which means eventually I'm going to get great at it. That tangible story, okay, somebody did this. We have proof this is actually happening. That ratchets up your confidence that this is worth listening to so much more, that you're going to get more per minute of the technical thing that follows.
That makes perfect sense to me. And again, that personal story making you a connection, not just an ad, not just someone who's up there talking numbers. You're now a person to them. They're going to remember you a lot more than the other guy wearing a suit tie just pointing at a graph.
Yeah. You get all of those huge, huge benefits for the personal connection, which would apply for other genres. If you're skeptical of everything, just the fact that they're going to be more believing that it's true helps, even if you're just the most hardcore technical person on the planet. Got two more. There's a huge retention lead. If we get people up to 50% listening to 50% of the speech, great. But they walk out the door and they forget it. Most people don't retain more than 1% a week later. If you leave it in a story form, you remember so much more of it. Stories are the only way we had to retain information for most of mankind's history. We didn't have writing for most of our survival. This has been ingrained as not as a hobby, but as a freaking life or death survival trait for 99% of humanity's history before it could read or write. It is so baked onto you that you can't turn it off even if you want to. You put it into a story, those people will remember it. The example in the book was, I'll probably repeat this again later, but he was talking about apples. And he had a product that he was selling, and you could either buy 20 different varieties from a competitor, the exact set that fits you, or you could buy this one, which could be modified as what to fit anything, but it was more expensive because it could do anything, and it was more work. And great ideas. He starts the story saying, I have to go to the grocery store every week and buy 7 different types of apples. So I have a wife, and I have 2 kids, and everyone wants a different type of apple, and some of them want 2 types. But I could just go and say, screw you all, granny apples for everybody. Well, like, what kind of life would that be? How much are we going to be enjoying? Like, it's worth the extra effort. And that stupid story gets you thinking so much about, okay, it's not just a random feeling of, I like freedom. It's, I see how specifically getting the extra work to get the specific thing I want pays off so much for me. You remember that a week later, you're going to be thinking, oh yeah, the apple guy. It's so easy to conjure up. And you also get spread on top of this. Because if you just tell the technical information, my thing is custom exactly what you want. You're not going to ever say that to another human being. You tell this story. You run into a guy who's doing something similar later on. Like, oh, like the Apple guy. What's the Apple guy? Oh, let me tell you about the Apple guy. And you tell his story, which is baked in your DNA as a human being to do. And bam, more people get free advertising on this thing you're trying to promote.
100%. A memorable story that people want to tell and are excited to tell their friends will spread like wildfire. There's no denying it. I mean, even when I'm working at the liquor store, I'd already told one person a story about, I can't even remember, just off the top of my head, I told one about Masataka Taketsuru. Surprise, surprise, I know that story. And the Suntory whiskey. And next thing I know, they're using that to sell a bottle to a customer.
Yeah.
They didn't get the names at all right, but they got the idea of the story.
That's another way to actually show you what was the most important part of the story, the part that stuck with them.
Well, it's also not really surprising that I couldn't teach the 60-year-old man Masataka Taketsuru's name. I got the story to stick and the meaning behind it, but he did not get that name right.
I don't understand. It's such an easy name.
Yeah, I mean, I only had to come to you for help on how to pronounce it.
I was really glad how beautiful it sounded at the end. Man, just like immersion. That felt great. Like, okay, so that all wraps into one big bucket of two reasons why this is super great for teaching is people remember more of it. They hear more. Second reason, the biggest reason, and you ever have these things, Ryan, where the giant thing is staring you in the face so much that you can't believe you didn't see it?
Literally or figuratively, because I do work in a liquor store where I have stared at a shelf of whiskey going, where is this one bottle? And it's right in front of my face. So I've had this happen a lot.
It's a thing. It's a thing. So you're going to think I'm silly when I tell you what the thing is. The second reason that this is very, very powerful teaching, education, training, the kind of thing that I am trying to do, struggling really hard with, it's related to the idea I just told you. The storyteller's job is to get the audience to love them. And my supporting reason for this is when I think about my own experience, which should be the first place I started with all of this if I wasn't a moron. These things are so important to me that I want to teach other people, that I wish I'd learned sooner. How did I ever learn about them? I didn't learn about them from a cool ad. I didn't learn about them even from a really, really compelling story. I learned about them from two people that I really, really liked. I'd listened to their podcasts, consumed so much of the material that I trusted them as a person, trusted their style, their judgment. I knew if they liked something and thought it was valuable, I could just guarantee it's going to be both effective and also the kind of style I like. Guaranteed. And Lucas Rockwood, Charlie Hooper. And when Lucas Rockwood was recommending this kind of hippie flexibility program, I just knew it'd be good. Tried it. That's something I would have ever tried. And we're talking right now about that clarity, the 6 fundamental human needs. That's from Tony Robbins' Personal Power 2. His original ad back in the 90s was horrific. There's no way I would ever listen to that, even if I had gone back in time and shook myself and yelled it. But listening to Charlie Hubert saying, this is really powerful, you should definitely do it. Like, if you are saying it, I know it has to be true. That was the thing. The affection that he had built and trust in his judgment over time, where still no convincing of this thing is good, he is the thing that I'm trusting. And that's what got me in.
Interesting.
That's why you tell stories. That's why you tell personal stories in business and functional work. Because if you get the people to care about you, they will try the thing that is missing that they never thought would do it. Otherwise, they would have already tried it. But they trust you, so they'll do it for you.
So it's building up that credibility.
It goes a bit beyond that, because you can have credibility with facts. When you start getting into the personal story, you get into like, you know what? I like you. I kind of don't want to let you down, or there's a trust to it because, you know, we could get out Genghis Khan. He's very credible. You don't trust him.
That's fair.
I trust you to completely bomb my city and take over. Yes, that's still not what I'm looking for.
Fair. I can see that. I suppose it would also depend on what they're recommending or what they're talking about. Because if you had Genghis Khan telling me, hey, here is this great strategy that I think you should use, I'd probably believe him. But if he tries telling me, oh, you should come over, hang out, I'll welcome you with open arms, I might be a little bit more concerned.
That's a good point on trust. I'm going to hit on this one bit harder because if we're talking about teaching something where it's such a big leap, such outside your norm, or so abstract, you can't even see what the effect's going to be. So it's kind of a situation. I don't know, is this asking for a battle plan or asking to have dinner with them? You don't know what it is yet. That's why you get this whole level of the phrase that I like. Don't take advice from somebody who doesn't have a life you want. tangible example is you got Charlie Hooper, Alex Hermosi. Both you can have very capable and very high confidence that they know what they're doing and could succeed in business. I don't want the life that Alex Hermosi has. It seems unpleasant to me. It's not the kind of thing that would make me happy. So a lot of his advice I have to take with a grain of salt. The reason why I was able to jump into this from Charlie Hooper's advice, because so much of what his life is, the results he's gotten from the direction he's going is so similar to what I want. That's why I could have that level of closer affection, but also that type of trust where if he says it's good, it's not just going to work. It's going to take me to where I want to go.
It's a very good point. I like that. Looking ahead at how that advice is treated them.
The only way to really get across that is through the personal stories. I heard a lot from Charlie through his work over the years, and that's how I know what life he has and what he's gotten, what he's aiming for in the future. If he was just telling technical information of do this, it works, do that, it works, I would never have that layer.
That makes perfect sense, and I really like that advice. Thank you.
You're welcome. So let me ask you, fine if you don't have anything on top of your head, but are there any people like that you've had where they were really close to you and you kind of would trust their advice even if you didn't really understand why it was going to be good advice?
There are people who I have had that trust in, and they had a lifestyle that I wanted. But weirdly enough, a lot of them, that lifestyle kind of fell apart, or it was artificial to look like something on a camera. It went downhill for them over time.
Okay.
So it's one of those things where I've been questioning how much to trust some of their advice. Do I look at things before that happened? How far back do I need to go? What led to where I don't want to follow?
That's pretty deep. Any people that are outside of your personal life? Podcasters, authors, anyone like that?
There definitely has been in the past, and I think as I've grown, I've changed what I want, what lifestyle I want, so that a lot of them aren't as applicable anymore.
Well, time to find new ones then, I suppose.
Yes, it is.
Cool. Next point is this all works, I said for teaching, it works in business sales, keynotes, stockholder meetings, all this kind of stuff. The reason why this matters to us specifically, you can see how it can apply for these functional situations. We're not in a giant business. We're not running a company. We're solopreneurs. So how does this relate to our situation? It's even better. You know when you play Mario Kart, you ever play?
Sure.
What happens when, the 25-year-old guy is playing his 8-year-old nephew and he's just crushing him, zooming so far apart because he's so much better at it? What happens?
Depends on how nice he is. Does he slow down to let the little guy have a chance? Or does he show him like, oh, there's this shortcut over here you should check out?
The game actually has built in what's called a rubber banding effect. So that the further ahead you get, the more it slows your engine down and gives you more obstacles, speeds up the guy behind you and gives him more weaponry. So the further ahead you are, the more it hurts, and it naturally keeps you guys coming close to each other.
Interesting. I didn't think about that bit.
Yeah. The storytelling in business is the Mario Kart's rubber banding effect. Because if you have a large company, they're so worried about their image. Their image is supposed to be so professional, stodgy, just pure, solid polish, that they are terrified of using stories. The guy who wrote this book, Matthew Dix, he coaches them one-on-one, and he talks over and over about how he would give them a great idea. They would go, that is a great idea. We are too terrified to do it. This is your advantage from being the small guy. If you want to catch up with other people, there's a lot of business techniques we can learn. This is one that will give you so much more outsized advantage for your position than it will give to them, that this is a really high priority to be hitting on. For you, you can get really deep into a personal story because you're not afraid to, and you're pouring everything into making your business work. You can be more funny and tell all these jokes and stuff. If something goes horribly wrong, it's not the end of the world for you. So you're going to get massive quantities of arguably the one of the most powerful things you can do in business, while your competition, the people who have the advantages, are just using teeny tiny drops and kind of half-assing.
That's interesting. The almost risk versus reward for being smaller. You have less to lose by taking those risks.
It's also easier to use it well. There's the fact that is not just a story, but it's a personal story, has a lot of power to it. And if it's you, it's naturally easy to tell your personal story, and you can be really, really well. If you have a corporation, it's kind of, well, whose story should tell? Who gets allowed to? Yeah, like, you're the author, but the CEO is going to sign off on it. There's a lot of dilution of who is the person. You talk about a faceless corporation. Hello, Ethan Smith LLC is this guy. There's no question of who it is.
So, just a weird thought that I had. Something that I can see a lot of brands moving towards is what Tito's has kind of done. If you're unaware, there is an official Tito's dog now that they rescued.
Aww.
And you can read the story of this dog. And that's brilliant. Who doesn't like a dog? You can feel good about supporting this brand. They donate back to dogs, shelters, or whatever.
Yeah.
There's no risk having a dog as your spokesperson. They're not going to turn out like Jared from Subway. You've got nothing to worry about.
Spuds McKenzie. You remember? Did you even hear him? He's before your time, I'm sure.
Oh, I know Spuds McKenzie. Come on.
Yeah, that was America
story to where it's lasted.
Man, I'm glad that's a beautiful transition to what I'm getting to next. There's two parts I want to hit on this, but one is how and why it's important that it's a personal story. Picking a dog, it's great. That is like, you can make that very tangible, but it's still somebody else. This is a chapter where I've been saying for so long how this writing and speaking, we need one word for the whole thing together. But it's literally like magic. It's not almost like it or a good metaphor for it. It seems actually what magic is, what people were talking about before, and we just misinterpreted it, because you're creating out of nothing with your voice and your gestures and your words, and it literally just mesmerizes people and changes what the world is doing. And this thing right here is the biggest and most perfect part of that metaphor falling into place. What he talks about is, he's famous for his TED Talk called Homework for Life, which is telling you to every day write down what was the most significant story-worthy thing that happened to you that day. So you collect those, and you gain the skill of getting better at noticing them when they happen, so the stuff you collect gets better. But really, it's going on about other techniques of looking at your past. How can you jog your memory from the biggest memories from your past that had a good story in it? Collecting them all, writing them down. And they're your stories, okay? It's not cute dogs, or it's not Napoleon's. It's yours. This, Ryan, it's building your spell book. It is freaking crazy. There's two big parts of this. One, the story is not as powerful if somebody else tells it. If you have this thing collected, we go and, grab Matthew Dick's spell book, and we start reading those stories, it won't have the same effect as when he does it. Because when you tell your story, there's so much more emotion that comes through it. It's attached to you. There's 1,000 subtle things that we can't explain, but we know that's actually you saying it and you believing it, not just telling someone else's story. And that is where you get that exponential leap of how powerful this stuff gets. This is one of those reasons why some people think, well, who cares about studying public speaking because it only gets you this much. That extra hook is why this gets up to 100x, way bigger than most people realize.
Interesting. Part of my head was just thinking of my stories, and so many of them are based on customer service and interaction with other people, whether that's things they've told me, things I've overheard, their experiences that they've told. And I was just sort of realizing, I think part of the success I had in telling a lot of those stories was because I was in the same environment where they took place. I could point out and say, yes, they were sitting right over there, 2 stools away from you. 2 guys, and I heard them talking, and one goes to show another one an article on his phone. And the man looks down at the phone, looks back up at his friend, and says, "How dare you assume I'm literate?" And I had to duck around the corner of the bar. When I can literally duck around the corner of the bar, make it seem like it's happening there in front of them, of course it's more engaging.
Mm-hmm. And in that instance, you're telling a story about somebody else. It's still your story. I saw this. I felt that. That's actually one of the number of techniques in this book that brought it from how do I take these pure emotional entertainment stories and attach it and use it. So yes, you doing the whole Princess Bride thing of weaving together someone else's story into your personal experience, that's a way to magnify all of it, the magnify the number of opportunities you get. But it has to come back to, this was my reaction. If you were there, you tell your version to your story of how you felt and what you thought, but it's not going to be mine.
That's really interesting. I didn't even realize I had been doing that.
You're a real natural, which is going to be a great combination of the work we do together.
Sometimes. There's other things where I definitely still need to work on it.
There's a saying that if you're terrible at something, you have to learn all the details of it, so you end up having a higher ceiling. And if you have a natural and someone who has to learn it the hard way working together, you can unlock each other's ceiling.
Sounds like we found a good team here then.
I think so, Ryan. I think so. Now, for this, that's also the time part. There's a lot of reasons why it being your personal story, that's a huge advantage. It's way more powerful on the stage. That's the number one reason why it matters. It's like 10, 100, maybe even more X powerful. Second of all is after it, the power of your story isn't just when you tell it on stage. You know, a lot of the stuff that happens in business and even in your line of work is going to be the networking, the hand-to-hand talking, the sales pitch to the book agent that you're going to have someday, those kind of things. And when it's your story that you told, the people will ask you other details about it. And you can go on about those other details. And it's not them quizzing you for a book report or to build a product. It's because they are moved by it and want to know about you. So you're going to be sharing this deeply personal moment that's even more powerful than the stage experience where like, so yeah, I kind of had an experience like that too. And like, la, 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 like, oh, wow. You know, like, what was that like? Well, I relate to that because in my experience, which actually happened to me, this, and this. And if it's not your story, all of that's gone.
That is absolutely one of the most powerful things. People will forget 90% of what you say, but they will listen to you tell a story. And they won't remember all the details, they won't get everything from it, but they'll remember part of it, and that's more than what most people can manage.
Turning people from customers into friends and fans is a big important thing. This goes back to the storyteller is trying to get the audience to love them. And every person who I'm modeling and going through their steps to try and, you know, put this business together, they all have 1 or 2 steps where they said, I presented on stage, and then I had to go to talk to people and try to sell my product, or people get to sign up for it, or try to get them to like join my newsletter. And the fact that you can have that bonding thing with the face-to-face chat part. Without that, the chain's broken and they're still living in a garage today. The third part of that is it's easier for you to write your stories. your stuff adds so much to the culture of the world because you have to do this research and create that. You're actually building something. The spirit of podcast, it's a product. It's amazing. If you were telling stories about yourself, it's a lot easier. You can do it a lot faster, get the reps in, and become a master using this stuff way faster if you're just telling your own stories. So 3 big reasons why personal, big gas.
So I'm not sure that how much you remember this, but do you remember how I start every episode before my intro sequence, everything? The very start of every episode.
I remember you talking about, I just remember the first episode. I want to take you back to my 21st birthday. That one, dang, I forget it.
So every episode, I try and start with a personal, whether it's me telling a story, whether it's me telling why I value that story. I try and do something that's more about me, add that personal element to it. Because absolutely, it builds the credibility. It gives the listener a sense of who's telling me this. It's not just an audio book. It adds more character to your work, makes it more memorable, makes it your own.
Very much. I remember one episode us talking about that, about how you sandwich it in where the story is still your story because it's woven into this is how I connect with it. And then you end with, that was a great story. Now I'm going to get a glass of whiskey. And that seems like just paper wrapped around it, but it is the big multiplier. It's the huge core of it.
Don't get me wrong. If someone wants to listen to one of the podcasts and just skip it and only listen to the beginning bit, I'm fine with that too. No hard feelings there, but I try and always have a more personal note at the beginning.
In a future episode, when we're actually just going through the how-to of this stuff, that thing right there hits like 4 different spots. I'm going through the book and go, oh, Ryan's naturally doing that. And this one thing he does hits 4 of these things already. Which is why, again, I'm so excited that I can start looking at what you're using instead of just enjoying it as a fan. I can start applying it as education for what I'm trying to do now, which is great.
So what we can try and do at some point, if you want, is I'll find a story that I want to write about, and I'll try and record or do something to where you can get into the process of how I figure out what personal story I want to attach to it.
That hooks to the very next thing I wanted to say. This is part of why the personal stories are really powerful, and part of why this is such a massive advantage if you're competing with a larger competitor. This takes time to do. You, right now, Ryan, have a lot of really great stories that are really interesting and everything, and you probably can only recall 1 or 2 of them right now. If you start doing this process of writing all of them down, building your spell book, you end up creating a collection of things that you can pull out at a moment's notice for whatever situation needs it. When we were talking about the Stage Academy, he had this discussion about how to link your story to any kind of serious topic. And I was so excited about that because that gave me that tiny little, not strong, but it could connect. It was more, I guess we'll allow this instead of Matt Dick style of we're actually going to use this to magnify it, but it was still huge. If you are just going off the top of your head, that's what you have to do. I have a story. I can shoehorn it into this. If you are collecting your stories and writing them down like this, collecting your spell book, the number of situations, let me put it a different way. The closer fit you already have from your stories gets more of a fit. So there's less of that squeezing it in and more of this is naturally adding to it. And if, say, you have a big competitor, you start nuking them out of the water because you're telling such great stories that everyone's so interested in. They want to work at your product, work with you. They go, great, we start to do stories. Like, okay, call me in 10 years. If you want to compete with me, you need to go back in time 10 years, start writing down all the stories you can remember, and then finally can catch up with me. There's no way to counter this nuclear attack. It's too late by the time they realize what's going on.
So I haven't been writing down personal stories that happened to me. Something that I probably should be doing, but instead, what happens a lot of times is I'll get home from work, whether it was at the bar, my current job, or something else in the past, and I'll talk with Ashlyn about how her day was, and most of the time I'll tell the most entertaining story of what happened. Last night there was a man in the liquor store, older man, gray beard, everything, walking around, pacifier in his mouth. Yeah, customer service. It's a wild time. You never know what you're going to see. And just having that little recap at the end of the day makes me remember the most memorable thing and makes it more likely for me to be able to recall it again.
Nice. So every day you're retelling the stories to Ashlyn, and that's giving you your practice.
Something that I naturally sort of fell into.
Good stuff.
Not quite as permanent as writing them down, but it's worked decently for me so far.
Yeah. So keep doing what works for you. I have naturally tried to write almost everything down for a long time as part of my personality. And I've gotten better at writing down exactly things that I think will be relevant for this kind of stuff, and keep collecting. And the more I do this formally by actually writing it into a spreadsheet, the more I actually start seeing the multiple uses that each story could have, where, I just like this story. Actually, I see a really profound situation where that could be used, and it wouldn't be shoehorned. It would be the exact fit. And now I'm starting to see, well, this could be a lesson on A or a lesson on B, the more I get used to this. And, like when I did the Stage Academy thing, I last minute found out I had to have some stories of a specific type ready. And the fact that I already had things I could be proud of and excited about, that made that whole experience so much more enjoyable and educational.
Absolutely. Having those great stories, amazing, works the best. But like you said, even just having a little one to shoehorn, give you some of that credibility and trust. Like if I told people, hey, I've been working customer service for over half my life, I've got over a decade of customer service already experience, you might trust me. If I say, man, I've worked customer service almost all my life, you would not believe some of the things I've seen. Just the other day, had a full-grown man, gray beard, everything, pacifier in his mouth. People are crazy. I've dealt with that. Let me help you. All of a sudden, that's so much more engaging. And what does that have to do about anything? Not much.
It's a magnifier. Magnifiers are what we put on lasers. It's worth the extra cost.
Absolutely.
Now to go to actually how to do it. I picked two of the most powerful ways to connect these personal type stories into a functional business type of situation. The thing that I was just gnashing my teeth struggling with. There's other ones, but we're not going to take all day on it. Number one is that it doesn't have to be a dramatic personal transformation story. That was the core problem I had. His first book, he was telling great ideas. These are such compelling stories and such great storytelling techniques. I love the result, but I can't use any of this because he keeps hammering home a story is when there's a 5-second personal transformation where something about you changed forever. I can't shoehorn that into these technical things at all. And that was the number one thing that stopped me. In this book, he explains, it doesn't have to be that. The other way you can do it, which I actually think is more accurate, is you can have a realization. In real life, the actuality is your transformation happened bit by bit over years. You build a mountain, you just poured dirt on it every day for years. It didn't just have a 5-second transformation. And that's how a lot of these business and technical things happen. It's real world, hard, difficult stuff that takes forever. But the realization, that is a 5-second moment. And that you can use, and that would work great. So there's something that you were working on the whole time. And, what was I saying just a couple minutes ago? about how it's staring me in the face that getting people to like you is the biggest teaching tool, and it's actually what worked on me. It had been happening to me for years. I benefited from years, but it was when I was in the middle of reading this book, I had a 5-second thing where like, oh crap, I see it now. That's a story you can tell, short, dense, powerful, and use.
Yeah, that's very profound. I like the sound of that.
So we got that. And the second one is, especially in business, smaller stories are more powerful than big stories. From the other book, again, he's trying to tell these TED Talks and 15, 20-minute speeches that are dramatic and entertaining, basically mini movies. And that's the complete opposite of what I'm trying to do. I don't have 15 minutes at all, much less 15 minutes for the story part. If you're doing technical, functional stuff, the less dramatic actually has more power. The really great example is I could tell you about the time I was working on nuclear reactors in a military submarine. And that's really dramatic. That'll get your attention, right? That's the kind of thing I would normally think to do. Big hook, yay! No one can relate to that experience, so it has no effect. That is one of the most weak, worthless stories of all. But you talk about something really small, like the guy with the apples. People can relate to that. Wanting to have all the many different things you need for the people in your life who are all different, That's so relatable that it turns out the small stories, which are, one, easier to collect, two, a lot easier to tell. If I'm going to talk about some big personal trauma that happened when I was in high school in the middle of a sales call, that's freaking weird. But if I talk to you about my grocery shopping with my kids, that feels work appropriate, and it's actually more powerful.
I think this is something that comedians do especially well. They don't take a story of something crazy that could get them on the news and tell that all the time. They might tell one or two of those, and that's their big story that they're well known for. But the majority of their stories that they tell are going to be little things where, yeah, I was out with my kids and they did this one weird, silly thing, and everyone connects with it because we all know how silly and weird kids can be. They're making it something where, oh, it's relatable, I understand that's happening, but it's still ridiculous and fun.
I love it. And it's the magic trick where I never noticed that's why it was happening or that's what was going on. But man, that's it, dude. That's it. So between these two things, this big, difficult, insurmountable thing that I've been trying to learn and do turns out to be really small, bite-sized that can be done. And I'm excited to start applying this once I finish reading the book.
I do really like the small bite-sized stories, personal, but I think there's also something where you can take those bigger, wilder stories, condense it down, and use it more as a metaphor. Like, I can give you an example of this. When I was younger, probably like 12, 13, a good friend of mine, his father was in the Navy. They let me tag along with them on a trip to the naval base in Chicago, which, fantastic experience. Never would have been able to do that otherwise. And we went to a naval museum and onto an old submarine. Now, on this old submarine, the beds for the crew, right beneath them, live torpedoes. Because if you were going to get fired at, you were expected to roll out of bed, load the torpedo, and fire back.
Immediately.
The amount of stress that you would have to be under sleeping on top of live ordnance, my goodness. And you know what? I think we can all relate to that.
So the big thing is relatable to, yeah, I see what you're getting at.
Talk about the emotion. It wasn't even my emotion. It wasn't anything. this is something that I know about. Here's the personal experience that I had of seeing it, and we're going to connect to you on the emotion of it.
It's very comforting for me to now understand that the very small stories can be used, the very big stories can be used. And that torpedo story, I would agonize. I don't know. Is this a small story because it's about sleep, or is it a big story about weaponry? Like, it doesn't matter. It's still going to fit. We can use everything now. Just make it the best story you can and start pushing forward on the good stuff. We can start making the magic instead of trying to agonize about how to do it.
You just need to figure out what you need to connect with. So there, I was trying to connect with stress is why I used that one, or I could connect into not sleeping well. If you gave me another emotion, or if you gave me another topic, I would choose a different story that if you wanted me to talk about something more pleasant than how good life is, I'm not going to use one about struggling to sleep and stress. It's finding out where can this story connect and how can I make it work, or what other story would fit this gap better. It's like playing Tetris.
That's a good metaphor. And I'm excited about the spellbook thing because it feels like it gives me more types of pieces, so I can always have the one that fits the best.
End of the day, it still feels to me like there maybe is 5-6 different types of Tetris pieces, and you can rotate them around and make them work a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, they all have a lot of similar factors, and it's just knowing which way to spin it to make it fit and work.
I'm liking these metaphors. Now, surprise springing on you for getting more of these personal ideas, personal stories jogged out your brain. There's a exercise called 3, 2, 1, and we're going to do it right now.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
I will go first. What you do is you look around and you're going to pick 3 items from your room. They have to be physical things.
Oh,
I will have 1 minute to recall something that's ever happened in my life related to one of those 3 items and tell a story that's, 20 seconds to max 2 minutes long.
Okay. So you're picking out 3 objects and telling a story about one of them?
Yes.
Okay.
If you want to blend them more together, you can be fancy, but you have to pick one of those items about. So you're digging into your past about a complete surprise new area.
Okay, I can do that.
So you just pick the items for me, and I'll tell the story.
Oh, I have to pick the items for you.
Yeah, it has to be a complete surprise. So the person who picks is not the person who talks.
Well, your set's getting a little dark there. It's hard for me to pick something out right now, I'll be honest.
Pick out of your room.
Oh, pick something in my room for you there.
Yeah. 3 tangible objects that are around you, and I do the rest.
Oh, goodness. Okay. And you have to tell a story. Is it a true story, personal story?
True story about my life. Doesn't have to be a good one, but it has to be something from that I've lived.
Okay. Let me try and find some good objects for you that are close by. I'm going to try and set you up for success since this is our first time doing this.
Appreciate that.
And
we can make ourselves hate each other later.
Good. Okay. I've got some stuff. So, option 1 is going to be one that I know you can talk about and tell stories about. Tennessee Whiskey Trail Passport.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Option 2, wine cork.
Mm-hmm.
And then, which one do I want to do for 3? I've got a couple here that, well, Let's do a bottle of melatonin.
Ooh. Okay. Give me 60 seconds. Oh, fuck me. I actually might go with melatonin.
I figured that might be a personal connection. Everyone's got something with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thought about it. The melatonin thing that I can recall would be funny, but it doesn't really have any purpose to it. There's nothing that happens as this haha. He refers to those as antidotes. For the whiskey trail, I can almost turn that into some sort of story. So I'm going to give that a try. I'm going to try and stretch my limits. One of the purposes of this exercise is actually to have very tiny, boring stories and get comfortable with that just so you start collecting more. And naturally, you get those reps in, you'll get better. You'll never get better at thinking and recalling them unless you start getting the surface level ones. But let's go for it. So trying to stay under 2 minutes actually should be hard. Hard stop. The first whiskey passport I ever had was on my first trip to Nashville. I remember I was standing in front of, I think it was the Hermitage Hotel downtown, waiting for the earliest bus to take us to the tour out to Jack Daniel's distillery, and made friends with this couple. Forget the names, so we'll call them, Jordan and Julie. We're on the way down to the 2-hour ride, and I obviously am not going to wait 2 hours before I start drinking whiskey. Who are you freaking kidding? I pull out a bottle that I bought for the occasion. And as we're chatting and sparring it around, the tour guide's getting increasingly annoyed that we're not listening to her. Gradually gets more comfortable that, okay, this is less work and these guys are fun drunks, not angry drunks. But then eventually, like, yeah, this guy's stories are better than mine. So he just chickens out and starts listening too. About midway through the day, we stopped for lunch because we've been drinking heavily. And this is, again, my first time in the South ever. We stop for lunch, and I sit down at the table, and there's a big family style thing. As a joke, I go, so who's saying grace? And everybody, without a hint of humor, just looks, aw, like, thank you for suggesting that, Ethan. Well, since you suggested it, I think we'll let someone else pick. And one of the older gentlemen bowed his head, start saying grace. And that was the first moment where I felt that feeling of Nashville, where this is so completely different than what I was looking for. And I am not a part of this, but I feel so comfortable and welcomed and safe from a lot of the things I was trying to run from.
I like that. That's a great little story.
How did I do on time?
I think you hit that 2-minute mark exactly, too.
Hell yeah. I struggle with shutting up. So good. Awesome. So that was fun. And I could write that down if I liked it. I still got rep at thinking about my past, even if I didn't. So now I'm going to look at 3 objects for you.
All right. I feel like I need to shake off some cobwebs here. It's been a minute since I've done any writing or real storytelling.
The main thing is just try to remember events in your life that were interesting or affected you in some way. Ideally, if it affected you in some way. The storytelling part itself, that's a separate drill we do another day. I'm going to go with guitar, stove, and laptop.
It was a guitar, a stove, you said?
Yep, oven, stove.
And a laptop.
And laptop.
Man, okay.
And you have a minute to think about it.
I don't have any good stories about a stove that I can think of. Alright, well, I'm gonna have to go with guitar, I guess. And I've never told this story before. This is gonna be a very rough one, but we'll see how I do.
Mm.
So I have no musical ability whatsoever, and I've worked hard to get up to that level. I used to be worse. When school naturally had a band program, and all the kids were signing up for it, and I thought, okay, I want to do that. All my friends are doing it, I want to do it too. My aunt is a band teacher and said, all right, I'm over for the holidays. We'll see if he has any musical ability whatsoever. The easiest one is, can he keep rhythm? Have him kind of march in place and clap his hands at a different beat. I literally fell over. No ability whatsoever. So again, I've had to work my way up to where I am at the no ability point. And a few years ago now, I got my grandfather's old guitar. I now have 3 in my possession, 2 acoustic, both from my grandfather in California, and my electric guitar is from my grandfather who just passed away here in Minnesota. And I know a little bit about what I'm doing just by watching YouTube videos. I can pluck the strings a little bit, but still don't have any real rhythm. But I'm thinking it's time I pick it up again, because with my grandfather just passing away, he left me another very nice acoustic guitar, and I don't even have it here with me, but eventually it's something where I got the motivation now. I need to sink some time into it and rise above what I was capable of.
That's beautiful, man.
How did I do time-wise? I wasn't paying attention.
You hit it perfectly on 2 minutes.
Okay, we're doing good then.
We got to look up a little. This is supposed to be a lot more awkward than it came out with. We might actually have a little bit of skills already, right?
Maybe, just maybe, we've been doing this podcast long enough to get us above the baseline for storytelling.
Yeah. So that was fun. I really enjoyed hearing that, and I think that was good. Jogging some more stories out. It'd be great to see the guitar someday, but I could see us doing this again sometime. This would be nice.
Absolutely, I want to do this more often, and I'm going to start challenging people around me that just because I think it's going to get out some interesting stories they wouldn't normally share with me.
Yeah. It's easier to start get to know. Like, that was some stuff I didn't know. You had a grad dad out in California. And I like knowing more about you, but it's a lot easier to get you to tell stories and for me to figure out questions.
Yes, everyone's life is so complicated. We forget things that are mundane, and oh yeah, of course I've got a grandfather out in Cali. He's been out there my whole life. I don't think other people find it that interesting until I bring it up.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to the main event.
The Halloween-themed one?
Man, that was such a great time. When I walked in, the head guy, Kevin, I cannot believe this guy's brain. He actually remembered my name and said, "Oh, hey, Ethan. I haven't been there in about 3 months because I don't have enough time for drinking anymore." And he's still that good. Yeah. And that was part of what made the night good, whereas not just the individual things, but that confidence and that I know everything they do is going to be done well. So I can just lean into enjoying it instead of wondering, well, what should I do next? Or how's this going to be? I took a bite of a caramel apple, and it was so good I actually exclaimed out loud, apples falling out of my mouth, like, holy crap! Like, I've never had an apple this good. And you can't be surprised there.
No.
So we had the menu. Let me share it so the audience can see it as well. And this should be a little bit easier, but I'm sure I'll find a way to screw it up. Hope you enjoyed my waiting music. Ta-da!
Hey!
So we got these 2 pages. We're going to start off, and each of us are going to mention which did we feel was the weakest story, read it out loud for a little bit of practice. These are nice and bite-sized. And then we'll discuss what's missing, what's wrong, and why it's the weakest. And then we'll talk about our favorites. So Ryan,
Good.
why don't you walk us through the one you felt was the least good?
Oh boy. Hang on, I'm trying to remember which one it was now. I know definitely which one's my favorite. It's trying to figure out which one's not. And actually, I think I told you the wrong one before. We're gonna go to the other page. I'm sorry.
Okay. I will never forgive you.
So, the weakest in my mind is the Devil's Cut, which is their barrel-aged Boulevardier. It sounds like a great drink, but the little exposition on it. Well, the angel shares the alcohol that evaporates and seeps out of an aging whiskey barrel. The Devil's Cut is the whiskey that stays in the wood, never to be tasted by mortal souls. It's also the bounty the devil collects on your soul when you don't order this drink.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, great little tagline, but it just doesn't have the emotional capacity of a story. And my first instinct is, well, I'm not going to listen to what a piece of paper is telling me to do.
Yeah.
Sure, devil's going to come for me. All right, bring it on.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. That one just was kind of the weakest in my mind.
Mm-hmm. I felt the same one. That's actually the one that I picked. So I'll pick a second one. But the Devil's Cut story is actually part of why I picked this activity for us to do. The shock between that and the one I ended up picking is so huge. I like that drink. That was a drink that I wanted to taste if I'm just picking for the experience of just the actual whiskey. And I didn't like the name. But the story was so bad, and the story that I chose was so good that the total joy of the inferior drink plus the great story was a grand total bigger joy that made me choose the other one. It really highlighted how powerful these good stories and the bad stories are.
Absolutely. Storytelling truly is everything.
For me, this one feels so abstract. It doesn't feel tangible. There's nothing that I hook onto or feel emotion to. It's kind of a statement of facts. They're spooky facts. They're just
That was
facts.
my thoughts exactly. This is just telling a story, or not even telling a story. It's just listing off a dictionary definition. And sure, we'll never taste devils. Yes, we will. There's brands who are squeezing it out of the wood. Jim Beam has a Devil's Cut bottle.
Yep. You see the challenge. Don't need to go into deep, but if you were going to have this handed to your desk and you wanted to fix it, what would you do to it?
Oh, let's see. Mine is kind of frozen up on me a little bit. I don't know. I probably would try and rename it. I maybe do some pun on a Boulevardier being Boulevard of Dreams or something and make it a Green Day reference. I don't know. But I'd try and find something I connect it to with a story.
Yeah. You're still a little harder because you can find to you something spooky or Halloween related. So I could see why it would be difficult to write for this.
I don't know. That one was just the weakest one in my mind, and
I want to throw this by you. And I'm just beginning to try to apply these knowledge that I'm learning.
okay.
But I think if we kept the title and the premise and everything and just did the bare fraction of adding a story, tangible story, I still think it would have a major impact. Let me know how much yeah or nah if we did it like this. We take it and we just make it into a visual scene. Have something, doesn't have to be a real person. So, okay. John Greenbrier would check on the Rick house every morning as his job. And the little bit that went missing into the wood that he could never get drove him insane. The devil's cut. It wasn't a lot, but the fact that it was forbidden and never his bothered him to the day he died.
Not bad. I think it's in a good direction. I don't know. I just don't even know why the name Devil's Cut is on that drink, other than that they're putting it back into a barrel. I think they could have done more with it. Personally, I think I would have thrown like some peach into it and then call it the Devil's Cut still and kind of tell the story of Devil went down to Georgia.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah.
I think that would be something that everyone knows a little bit more. They might connect with it more. Give it a fun new twist other than just barrel-aged Boulevardier. I don't know. I think this was just something where they had a barrel, probably just a small one of Boulevardier, and we're just, well, let's find a way to throw it on the menu and kind of shoehorn that one in. Looking at the rest of these, it doesn't have the fun seasonal flair that the rest of them have.
Well, at least for today, I'm more worried about just fixing the story than fixing the drink.
Absolutely.
Like, if this is the product we have, and we had to sell it the best possible. Well, that was the one I was going to pick, so I will pick a second choice. I'm going to go with, for least gripping, Toil and Trouble.
That was the other one I was between.
Yeah, see, we're starting to get it. And if you feel it, it's true. The magic part is just being able to understand why and then use it. Prohibition hit the town of Greenbrier like a fist to the jaw in a drag-down bar fight. It led many distillers, bottlers, and bartenders to learn new trades. The very first bartender at Nelson's originally distillery was none other than singer Ramblin' Robbie Richardson, who sang the song Trials and Tribulations, Make Mine a Double, Ramblin' Through the World on a Train, Bound for Trouble. Toil and Trouble, Make Mine a Double Double. Now, this one on the surface, it kind of hits some bullet points that look good. It has a tangible person, and it says, oh, they were here at this location working. So you have an action. And obviously, we're in Nashville. If you tie anything to music, that's going to be a big plus too.
Yep.
But it doesn't feel like a story. You're just mentioning this guy existed. It really is just facts. A statement that this guy was here. There's nothing that he did here or the progress he went through. What I was trying to get at the last one is, I think even if you just made it a story of one of the founders being minorly annoyed with something, that I think would stick with me a lot more than a massive thing, which is just a statement of fact. And there's no physical, I can't see myself being there watching this man do something.
So this one, I think, has promise, which the other one, in my mind, doesn't have much going for it. This one, it's got some points. I think they just kind of got it out of order, and I'm not sure if this is how it's supposed to be, but I think if they said the very first bartender at Nelson's original distillery was none other than Ramblin' Robbie Richardson, who, after Prohibition, hit the town of Greenbrier like a fist to the jaw in a drag-down bar fight, went on to explore a life of music, and wrote the song Trials and Tribulations, Make Mine a Double, rambling through the world on a train bound for trouble, Toil and Trouble, Make Mine a Double.
Dude, yes, that also gives like a journey. He's in the bar, Prohibition happens, he's fired because of that, and it leads him having to become a musician. That completely is a story.
I'm not sure if that's what actually happened and that's what they were trying to do, but it just feels disconnected in the order it's in right now.
One of the small tips that he throws out that is so strong, high ROI 80/20 is every sentence you write, every next sentence you write should either be in your mind connected by because or but. If they're all, and this feels like this, and then, and then, and then. But your ordering feels a lot like he was the first bartender, but prohibition happened. And because of that, then the next thing happened. And that gives us this feeling of momentum and meaning.
So this is something that I'm stealing from the writers for South Park on how to make a more interesting story. And that's, you never say, and then this happened. It's, this is happening, but this happens, so then it causes this to happen.
He mentioned the South Park writers in both of his books when he explains this point. And I remember you telling me this about the South Park writers when we were sitting on a sunny day at Bringle's Oasis back when you lived in Nashville, Tennessee.
Such good barbecue.
Man, yeah. They're actually putting walls on the outside part, like transparent plastic ones. So we're going to be able to eat barbecue outside in winter while watching football.
Oh my God. I need to come visit.
Bring the dog.
That is a long road trip for an 80-pound dog.
Now, show us the world. What's the cream of the crop? What's your favorite, Ryan?
Easily Thief of the Pumpkin Patch.
I like the name, too. Take it away, my friend.
Farmer Dan Branson was known throughout Nashville for his prized pumpkins, growing in the rolling hills of Cleveland County. As tales of his delicious variety spread throughout the 1920s, so did thefts of his pumpkins in the patch. To thwart the callous thieves, Branson poisoned one out of every four of his pumpkins, marking the safe ones with dye from purple pokeberry fruit. His plan worked until a heavy rain washed away the markings, and Branson ended up poisoning himself. His last word was, "Dadgummit."
Ooh.
This one just A+. Great. It sets the stage at the beginning with he's in these rolling hills. It gives us the time period. It tells us he was this great pumpkin grower, but people are stealing his pumpkins. So then he poisoned it, and that led to him dying. And then it ends, instead of being sad, somber, he died from poisoning himself with his last word. Yeah, it was "Dadgummit." Of course.
It ends with surprise and humor.
It's everything we were just talking about.
One thing I'm noticing is if you want to have a functional story, you have to never end with humor because you need to have that built up emotion to make someone do it. But if it's going for you're adding to a joyful experience, humor at the end just it's huge amount of joy and release. And yeah, I'm so excited for drinking my pumpkin patch now.
I mean, I just know I wouldn't like to drink. I'm not a pumpkin guy, and it's got roasted pumpkin puree in it. But I would order that, drink it, and then put down the empty glass and say, "Dadgummit."
And this is the thing to get into because we're whiskey snobs. We care a lot about the drink and the whiskey, and still the stories were powerful enough to change what we would order because we're looking for joy. And there's so much joy in these stories that we're choosing the story over the drink.
Absolutely. This is probably one where I would look at Kevin, because of course he'd be there. And I'd say, "You really put pumpkin puree in this. All right, I've got to try it." And before I'd even say it, he'd say, "Yeah, it's good. Try it." And that straight face, and Yes, it would be blowing my mind, and I would say, dadgummit, that is a good drink.
It came in a ceramic pumpkin mug, and the guy next to me was a massive whiskey snob whose wife was generously putting up with his stuff for the evening as a nice affection for him, and he still ordered one.
It's such a good, well-written, and honestly, I'm starting to wonder if they purposely wrote this one so well just to use up all the pumpkin puree and they didn't have to have leftovers. But if they had leftovers of the barrel-proofed or cask-aged Boulevardier, they can sell that next week. It doesn't need to be Halloween themed.
Mm-hmm.
They
This
didn't
is
need to try too hard with that one.
this is really revealing more the power of this storytelling skill. It seems like a frivolous thing, or maybe like a teeny little cherry on top bonus, but it's so powerful. I'm convinced now that this was part of some places taking over nations. This is part of. This is more important than having good B-roll. This is more important than so many things that I spent the past year trying to get better at. This is where my time needs to go.
So, funny you mentioned taking over small villages and things like that, because that absolutely happened. Genghis Khan, who we were talking about, yeah, there were villages who heard of what he had done to their neighboring villages, just opened the door, let him in, and said, yep, take what you want, we're not going to fight you.
All right. The one that I ended up drinking just because the story was so good was the smoky tea.
Okay.
This hits both on the topic and the story. And the story is what we're looking at today. Old Tommy Claus was a railroad worker who helped build the very tracks that snake across the city of Nashville and run behind our fair distillery today. His name stemmed from the long fingernails that plucked his banged up banjo into the night in early, even seedier days of Broadway. One night, his brittle bones were crushed by one of the first modern cars made down the street at Marathon Village. At night, you can spot his ghost if you blow smoke into the air in the direction of the railroad tracks.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I love this story. If you took out my interest in Nashville train lines and how it connects with the distillery and all these other things, I made a video about this. I'm going to make more videos about this. Even without this, it is such a great story. You almost have multiple stories in it. You have a very initial, tangible thing. You're talking about Tommy, okay? Person, could be anyone. He was a railroad worker. Okay, I have a good sense of what this guy was. But still, why do I care about him? Who helped build the very tracks that run by this distillery. Oh, this is very tangible, but also very meaningful to me now. I care about this distillery. It's why I'm here, but this is built here. Like, he did it. You feel like he's there. You feel like you're there. Then, we have more tangible description of stuff. Like Broadway's even more seedier than before. Then immediately being crushed by one of the cars that were also made in this building, which is something you can just look to your right and go, oh, yeah, the building right there is the old factory for this. It's so tangible, but it's tangible in your face. He lists, this Matthew Dix guy teaches a lot of techniques, and they all essentially are working for the same goal of trying to make the person stop looking with their eyes and seeing what's around them and see in their head that they're actually in the place right now that you're talking about. And those two parts, the Marathon Village car and describing him working on the rail tracks right in front of you, do such a good job of that for me. When you have that tagline at the end of, if you blow smoke, you might see his ghost. I'm so tangibly in this location with that guy's life. I'm feeling like, oh, frick, which direction is his ghost? It's not a question of where is he here. It's like, just where?
Oh, I'd be trying to bum a cigarette, absolutely. One of my favorite parts about this is they knew we'd be questioning, why is he called Tommy Claus?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't just tell us the side story of, yeah, he had long fingernails to pick a banjo. They used that to tie in and set the stage of where the story takes place. It's not just, yeah, he picked a banjo. It was, yeah, he picked the banged up banjo into the night in the early, even seedier days of Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
now we know, okay, early on and on Broadway, right here again.
They
Great
do
way
a
of just telling us that explanation, but also using it to further the story.
Mm-hmm. So efficient. Uses it to tell more of the story. And when you have such a very short amount of time, because this is only about 7, 8 lines, you can cram so much in if you have more skill, which is, again, in business and functional, you're not allowed a lot of time to talk about frivolous things. So the fact that you see how much you can cram in, just if you master your craft, you can get the big thing in.
I
They
think
even did a
I think it's also a great choice that they snuck that in, made him more personable, and then the very next line they have the shock value of him being crushed by a car.
mm,
They definitely did that intentionally.
it's I know this is going to be a hard bar to live up to, but this is the fact that you can have arc, you can even have pacing in something so short if you master the craft and keep working on it. Which is why I said many times, okay, I'm writing and I'm talking, but learning how to do it shorter is going to be the most important thing for me to do. Like, if you look at this, they even managed to have a little bit of suspense and surprise where they explain his name. They don't explain it in the first line. They save it for the second one, which is still pretty soon. But relatively in this story, that's a bit of a why the heck is he? Oh, moment for you.
It is a great just character. Here's why you care about him, why he's applicable. Here's something personal about him. Here's the shock value of him dying. And then here's the tying it back into the spooky ghost. Perfect.
Let me ask you, what does this story connect with the name of the drink, Smoky Tea?
Honestly, probably not at all. Um, yeah, I don't see anything. It doesn't sound like it's going to be smoky.
This is how much it doesn't matter if you'd master this stuff or not. Just do it. The story is next to the drink. I'm ordering the drink. You don't need to really scientifically link every little bloody thing. Do it.
I mean,
It's
I still would
code.
probably make this like a smoked cocktail just because those are cool and it will add to the
Mhm.
atmosphere, but
Yep.
no, I don't see anything saying anything. I mean, Graham infused Nelson-Greenbrier rye. I'm already all in. It sounds fantastic.
This was satisfying, Ryan.
This was great. I appreciate you bringing this to the show here.
When we got done, I just had to keep copy the menu, and they gave me a little bag to keep it in pristine condition. And I'm glad we had to do this together. Looking forward to doing more of these kind of exercises together. I'm learning a lot from doing this with you, but also this is fun as hell.
I'm gonna have to try and find something like that up here so that way I can send you some fun stories and see what you think of them.
Sounds good, man. Let's get to end of the episode questions.
Okay.
So, story and a question for you. First of all, this past week, I got my first ever comment on my YouTube channel that wasn't from somebody I already know, from an actual stranger that was so interested in what I said, they actually commented something. I went
Okay.
to look up to see who this guy was. He's got a channel too, and he's a really good speaker. It's one of those small channels where you're a little shocked that he's this good. Look through a little bit, and he talks about how his previous job was working as a bartender for 10 years.
I see.
So this brings me to the question, Ryan, we know how much skill you got in this stuff that just dunks on me every time we meet from your experiences at the bar. I want to know the other side. Who is the best bartender that's ever served you, where you enjoyed their stories, their talking, and their skills?
Oh, goodness. Most of the time it's when I go to a distillery, something like that, a brewery, and talk to either the founder, the owner, or the people making it. Because they've got such a passion that it draws you in. I'm trying to think some of my favorites. Kevin at Greenbrier is absolutely one of them. He's a fantastic guy, and he doesn't tell stories often, but it makes it that much more interesting when he does. Another one of them would be National Craft. I believe Bruce is the founder's name.
Mm-hmm.
He's not for everyone. He was like forensic scientist or something like that. First, he gets very into talking about like the specific breakdown of protein structures, that sort of thing. So you can't bring your friend who likes PBR there and expect him to be enthralled as much. But he's got such passion for it. It sucks you in, and he's the type of person where, oh, we're talking about how the still works. Well, I know you guys aren't here for a tour. You didn't sign up or pay for one. But you know what you're talking about, and I've seen you in here before. Let's go back.
Love that enthusiasm.
It's one of my favorite distilleries in town there.
I'll have to check it out soon.
That's
Oh, your mic's getting a little weird. Did you tap something? The mic just started getting really weird. Did you tap anything? Okay, well, we wrap it up anyway. Do you have a question for me?
I want to know. Tell me about the best drink you've ever had.
Ooh, that's a good question, man. I'm going to channel my writing skills that I've learned and not get stuck on the fact that there's 3 different definitions of good and want to tell all 3. I'm just going to pick one. I would say the best drink I ever had, it was Thanksgiving in Tokyo. And the woman I was seeing in the time out there wanted to take me something special. There's a lot of things where there isn't even a word for gravy in Japanese. It's impossible to give it. So there's a lot of things that you can't have a real Thanksgiving dinner. But you want to do something. So she took me to this restaurant called Ninja. It's like a theme park for adults. The second you walk into it, you feel like you're in a big mountain cave with a waterfall pouring through it. The person checks your reservation and then gets the hostess to walk you to your seat. The hostess jumps out of the ceiling in a ninja costume and says nothing. Walks you to your seat and doesn't walk away. Vanishes. This entire place is a magic show. Every drink you order You do not see how it got in front of you.
Oh,
And
that's
every
cool.
year is a different magic trick done by the server who is, I think, always there, but you only see him half the time.
Interesting.
So at that restaurant, I had I had as many things as possible, but I had my favorite. It's for, it's for a holiday. I want to feel that taste of home, familiar. And I had a Jack and Coke. And it was a beautiful experience of how it got there. And just like these stories, I sure love the drink, but the story and experience was so much more joy than the actual thing itself. It was my favorite.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Glad I could remember it. All right, this has been a beefier episode than usual, but this was great, dude. I like this. This was great.
Really fun video. Thank you.
So we'll do this again soon. I'll get this chopped, edited. Thanks everyone for sticking with us. I would love to hear about any kind of stories that you've really found have changed some of your decisions, whether it's food or other things in your life. And we'll get back in 2 weeks and discuss a bit more about the actual storytelling techniques. And now that we can use them anywhere, let's get better at them.
Really fun challenge for the listeners. Leave a comment, something, telling us a story about one of the items we can pick to tell a story about today.
Yeah, that's good too. That's good too. Great.
I want to hear what you guys have.
Beautiful idea, Ryan. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye.